Let's talk about the dealer scene a little bit. So how many shows do you set up at? I personally just do one. It's like a local show that's monthly. Just was easy for me with all the other non-hobby related stuff to kind of manage.
See, I'm enjoying more so going around and buying more than I have selling. It's as you know, it's a lot to like get everything ready to go and get it all priced out and then get it all set up and bring it there, bring it back. And you have the benefit of having it local to you. Sometimes I'm traveling a few hours. Like I did a show in Asheville, North Carolina last December, and that was a 7 hour drive. And I did extremely well, but it's just grueling to pack all that stuff up and then go back home. So, but going around and walking and buying, and I think you see it a lot now of a lot of people who are coming there to sell their cards or to trade their cards with dealers. I see people who are just going to the show to trade with other people. And I don't really think I would see that maybe 2 to 3 years ago. It's definitely a lot different than it was, but I usually set up at least once a month. I try to go around and buy at least once a month as well. So I'm going to about 2 shows right now. I'd like to increase that, but just sometimes scheduling doesn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost like a borderline epiphany back in December, and I ended up missing that show because I ended up getting sick. Um, Having a little one at home that goes to daycare, you're just exposed to so many germs. I literally got 4 colds in 7 weeks, four different
Ugh.
colds, all different symptoms and everything. But anyways, I was like, oh, I'm pretty excited for this show in December because it's December was a time where like the low to mid end stuff was sliding, and it still kind of is. It's picked up a little bit in January, as it always does in the hobby, I think. But people's discretionary income was going towards other things, feeling pressure from inflation, people getting frustrated, leaving the market. You could kind of clearly see that, which makes sense, which the types of people that drove up the prices in 2020, and those in the markets that got affected the most in 2020 got affected the most in 2021, where a lot of the air was taken out of the balloons of the ultra modern basketball and football markets, which we saw. But I'm like, when you set up at a show, you're really doing a disservice by not walking the floor at least a few times to see what other people have. So selling, it, when the market is as tough, when the conditions are what I described back in December, which is what we saw probably for a number of years in like the early 2010s, it was eh, and especially after a big bull market where things are clearly in a bear market where things have really slid, you're almost at an advantage if you're just walking around buying because people the dealers are like so cash flow deprived where they're willing to make concessions. They just want to make a deal, just to pay off the table or because they haven't sold much all week on eBay, Instagram, etc. And they're just kind of frustrated. They just kind of want to move stuff. So as a dealer at that same show or as a buyer, as you said, you don't need to set up at that show. You can just walk around. You can kind of take advantage of those types of situations. And it seems like, shady, but ultimately you're helping them out. You're helping them achieve their own goals. And yes, like I've found, I've set up at shows like I sold a bunch of stuff, but I lost today. Like I would have been better off not coming because the deals I did, sure, they're okay, but I could have done the same stuff at home on eBay and it would have been quicker for me to do that than to drive to the show. In my case, it's close, but what if it was like 2 hours away and then I'm spending money on gas and food and then my time? Like, was this really worth it to like make this money? Like after you like take the revenues and like look at the profit and like think like, but I would have been able to sell that card like 2 months later for more. I didn't really want to sell that one. And you feel inclined if you're setting up, like I got to maximize all this space. Like what Tiffany does with her retail stores, like they're really efficient, maximizing every square foot. And I got to make sure that I, bring out all this stuff and I got to make sure people want it too. But like, instead of trying to impress people and showing off a showcase, or instead of just filling space just to fill space, you've really got to think about like what's your goal, what's your strategy with each one of these cards. And for me, I was bringing a dollar box for like because I felt like, oh yeah, so the low end collectors will like this, and I've got like the higher end stuff. You don't need to like satisfy every type of demographic. Like you don't need to bring wax, a dollar box, and high end stuff because other people are going to have that stuff at that show, or they should. Maybe not as much anymore. Now you see all showcases everywhere, which is an issue. But what would happen is there'd be some cards that I forgot about that I just like I would have if I continued to bring out my dollar box this past spring, or I guess like March, April, I would have kept like $1, $2 Otani rookies in there from Topps Update, the rookie debut, the one from Series 2, and somebody would have picked those up, and those were gradable too. Like, I never sent them in because the decision point never crossed my mind, because the Series 2 card was not worth much in a PSA 10 for the longest time. The rookie debut, even less. There's a reason why the pops on those are still low. But me not bringing that dollar box out for like 6 or 7 straight shows, where I maybe would have profited like, I don't know, $15 to $25 per show, it allowed me to then hold back those cards, send them in for grading, and all of a sudden I'm sitting on like $750 worth of graded cards, where I've got a very low initial cost. So, and yeah, it's weird. Like, some of those shows, I'll make like 2 sales and I'll feel happy, but it's all like mental, like, oh, I got some cash. But like, I sold a box that I bought for $650 for $750, and this other, like, this was from the show this past weekend. Like, I helped this guy out. I gave him like 70% comps for a bunch of Pokemon stuff that I didn't really want, but like, these aren't like dollar cards. These are like $125 to $200 cards. Like, why couldn't I have just sold those on eBay? And I'm just thinking about it like that. Granted, some shows go better than that, but some shows I'm just sitting there and I don't do any deals. But yeah, I find like I've made most of my good decisions at shows as a buyer versus like a sitting duck, like standing behind a showcase where people are just like, it's almost like people are just like going at you, like shooting at you, like you're at like a target range or something. Especially if you're not up to date on comps on all your inventory, and if you're bringing a lot of stuff, like, good luck. One of the nice things, and you've probably seen this, is when you're selling wax, you have a lot more leverage than if you're selling singles. I've noticed this. And wax, I'm mostly not talking about like ultra modern retail, basketball, football. I'm talking about like, hobby, baseball hobby, and maybe some desirable retail stuff. You're dealing with a type of customer that's less likely to be a flipper, because again, we rolled out like the really, really recent retail that they're trying to get to like break or resell. You're dealing with people generally that are going to want to open that stuff. And it's almost like, the way I see it kind of is like, wax is kind of like oxygen, where these people, like, breaking's fun. Everybody likes to do it. You like to do it. I like to do it. You probably do it a little bit more than me. I know you did it a lot more in the past. But these people need it. They need wax. Granted, there's other people that could have it. Eventually, somebody's going to need yours because the supply is going to be depleted. With like individual cards, those aren't going anywhere. The supply is just increasing with those. And everybody at the show I do now, it's like a younger show that just started. It's all like the same stuff. Like, so your card's expendable. Your card is like, it's like a type of a cookie. I don't need to pick your chocolate chip cookie. I could pick a double chocolate cookie, white macadamia nut cookie. Subway serves a lot of different cookies. They're all good. But oxygen, wax is oxygen. That obviously that doesn't really stand today as much with like PSA shutting down its bulk services. And now, especially with the low end stuff, there's less demand to open it. Like, the type of products that you'd open where like 95% of the good stuff's like base cards that are no longer worth submitting. So I think about like Bowman Blasters, Flagship, Hobby, even to a lesser extent, some of the nicer stuff at like, mid-level price points, like even like 2021 Bowman Hobby. That's probably taken a little bit of a hit because of that, because that grading aspect's not only just taken away, but nobody knows when or what that new level will be. Like, and will it be this year, and will it come down to, $20-25 in August, or is it still going to be $50 in August after their 2020, after their 14 million card backlog is down to 0? What's that going to be like? And are they going to be distracted because they're now taking in, the $50 economy orders and maybe some other stuff, but between now and when they're projected to get through that 14 million? So I don't know, man. Anything there that you want to peel back a little bit and chime in on?
Yeah, you brought up a few points that I can definitely touch on from my own personal experiences. I will say that the dollar boxes have more than funded my table, my food, my gas for the show expenses. And it brings people to the table and gets them talking. And they do then look at the cards in the showcases, or I guess you couldn't call them the value boxes, but like the boxes of the stuff that didn't make it into the showcase. And I have dealers who comment to me like, well, why is, these boxes seem like they're really hot. And it's because I put, sometimes I'll put a $5 card in there I have it at 25 cents and they'll pick it up. And it's just not needing to milk all that. I think you see that a lot with people where they're like trying to milk every single dollar they can get out of everything. Like I've taken a stack out of a value box before, handed it to this guy, wants to look up every single card. I just tell him like, I'm sorry, man, I don't have the time for you to do this right now. I cannot be, if you're that worried about me getting this for $10 when it probably averages out to 15, like you got to find a different spot to wheel and deal. You're not going to, you can't be picking up pennies like that. But the value boxes are very interesting because there's this perception I always hear of, oh, well, I got to get there early, otherwise they're going to be picked over. And one of my more recent show recaps I talk about this, but I found a 2015 Prism Tom Brady green, which is about 75 to $100. It was in there for $2. And it wasn't like I found this at the very start of the show before any buyers came in. This was like towards the time that people were actually going to start packing up. It was probably the third or the fourth hour of the show at this point. And everyone had, I saw people at this table going through this box. They did not pull that card out. There were two other cards in there. One I had sold for $20. Another one I sold for 20 to 30, I would say. Those were also in there. And they may not have been as, I guess, obvious, so to speak, as like the Brady would be, is like this should not belong in a $2 box. But if you're willing to dig, like you'd be surprised at how many of these boxes still have stuff left in them. And I've done like little social experiments before where I've put, like one time it was beat up, granted, but I put a Kershaw Bowman Draft rookie in my dollar box to see how long would it take for someone to find this. And it took 4 shows. Wow. And people were going through it. Like people went through it and maybe it just didn't register or whatever it was, but just it's mind-boggling that it lasted that long. And I see it happen all the time where people will go through dollar boxes. I will go in right after them and I'll pull it out. And you don't know what they're looking for. Maybe they're just looking to build stuff on their sets or trying to toss some stuff in binders, but you just really never know. So that's one of the interesting things with the dollar boxes. And I think it's exactly what you said, is that people, I know for my dollar boxes personally and my value boxes, I do not go back through them to see what is in there. Like in my opinion, once it's in there, the only way it's coming out is if someone buys it. So I'm sure, like I remember one of the first times I did a rookie box and someone bought it out, and that was right before the 2020 MLB playoffs. And there's probably a few dozen Randy Arozarena rookies in there. So they definitely paid for their entire 3,200 count box with that handful of Randy Arozarena Series 1 rookies. So you just never know. Like a lot of that stuff, people don't go back through and look for that stuff because it's just not worth it to them. Like you said, like, is it worth your time to go in and look through your dollar cards to see if maybe one is worth $10 now? And for a lot of people, the answer to that is no. And valuing your time is big. On the wax point, there's a dealer here who does extremely well, and he sets up our local show. It's only probably 30 or 40 tables. It's not that large, but he has some older wax of like 2011 Bowman stuff. He has some older Prism football, not like 2012, but maybe 14, 15, your second, third year stuff. And people will buy those by the pack because it's all about the chase and going for that stuff. And I see that with a lot of the wax dealers too, where the ones that do have the hobby stuff, people will go to the shows to buy the wax. And they, like you said, it is an addiction. Unless you have this really dedicated collector who has to have a specific card for their collection, they don't really care. Especially, you mentioned at your show that it's pretty much all the same thing, right? Where it's all, I'm going to guess a lot of that is ultra modern basketball because that's what the stereotypical response is. Yeah. So, I mean, I could live without your Luka because there's another one down there if I really want to go get it. And this guy's probably offering it for $15 cheaper. So what are you going to do about that? So I totally agree with that point as well. Is that a lot of the wax buyers, they're more they I feel like they're more trigger happy, where they're going there to buy rather than to look, and they're not going to try to get you for market value or below market value. They're going to pick it up because they want to open it. They see it, they want it, they have the money, they're going to buy it. So yeah, I think that's right in line with what I've been noticing too.